Archie's War, the Battle for Guadalcanal. This is basically a two-game set, with each game being printed on a side of a double-sided board, and both games are about the same topic, which is, well, the Battle for Guadalcanal. The difference is one game is solitaire, so you're playing as the Marines against an AI representing Japanese attacks towards and against Henderson Field, and in the other game, it's a two-player game in which one player will take control of each side. We're gonna start by taking a look at the two-player game, and then I'll show you the solitaire game. So the situation is, well, the Americans have taken control of the island, but or part of it, but the Japanese are still gonna attack Henderson Field, which is represented by that location there. And their point is either to take control of it or to take temporary control of locations adjacent to it, because from there they can shell it with artillery. And if they do that 3 times during the game, so if they are ever adjacent to Henderson Field 3 times during the game, they win the game. Those are the 2 victory conditions: take control of the field or shelling 3 times from adjacent locations. Victory conditions for the Japanese player. If the American player is able to prevent that for 10 turns, then the American player wins the game. So that's the idea. This is a block game, so that units will be standing up and facing the owning player. The other player only sees the back, so that they see how many units you have in each location, but you don't by default know what those are. And the American player starts with this unit, the Van de Grift unit, which is a tank unit and is unbeatable in combat. If this unit is in a combat, the unit will always win against the Japanese. Attack or defense doesn't matter. However, there are ways of removing it not from combat. So there's the special unit for the American player. The American player will always start with that one. Then they will start with 3 units selected at random from their pool, and during the game you will usually receive units at random. You don't know what you get until you see what you get. The American player similarly will receive units from a face-down pool. So units will be facing the opponent, and you will get to reveal them, you will get to see what they are during combat. When units of the opposite side are in the same location, then you reveal them and you compare the values plus possible modifiers. And so if you're attacking a location, usually you need to have your total strength higher than that of the opponent for that to be a success. If you're attacking on a beach because of the open terrain, then in order to win an attack, you need to have 2 points or more higher than the defense. And that would be the case. Japanese are attacking. Well, too bad, the Japanese just lost. And if you lose, you're going to lose a block, and then the remaining blocks, if there are any, are going to retreat. If there is no way of retreating, well, that is also unfortunate, because you lose the remaining blocks instead. Also, we have connections on the board represented by solid lines and dotted lines. The solid lines, you can move through those lines without any problem. If you move through a dotted lines, if you move a group, then you're going to lose a block in the process, because again, these jungle paths are pretty dangerous. So, sequence of play. There's going to be each turn an American turn followed by a Japanese turn, and the structure is pretty much the same. First, the American player will receive 2 random reinforcements, but only starting from turn 3. The first 2 turns are tough. You gotta make do with those little things, those few units that you have there. You may also have noticed that some units have a strength value and other units have an action instead. And these are units that you can still move around as units. Matter of fact, the opponent doesn't know which ones have a strength value, which ones are actions. They may even defend, but with a strength of 0. They may take a hit in combat, but again, they have a strength of 0. Or you can choose at some point to spend them. It's a one-time effect. You use the special action, you remove the block. But back to the structure of the game. Starting from turn 3, The American player receives reinforcements, and all the reinforcements for the Americans are placed in Henderson Field. Then the American player can perform 2 actions, and the actions will be to move and or to spend an action and remove the corresponding block. For moving, basically you activate a location for movement, and you can move any and all blocks there. So a move can include multiple blocks as long as they start from a location and they move all together. You don't drop them off along the way. That would be more than an action, so that's not allowed. Once you move, you can move any distance that you want, but you have to stop if you encounter enemy blocks. And again, if you encounter enemy blocks, that is when all the blocks are revealed and compared, and you have combat, and that would have been a very bad choice for the American player, attacking A5 with simply 3 in an amphibious block. That would have been bad, but the American players don't often attack. Very often they prefer, say from there to there, I'm moving there. And I have a decent defense there. I have a defense of 7. I have Vandergrift there, cannot be destroyed in combat, etc., etc. So, your 2 actions. Again, spend cubes that give you actions and or move. As you move, as we said, you can trigger combat. You can only trigger 1 combat per round. Although, again, you can spend your 2 actions for 2 moves. You can only start stuff once per turn. And then you check to see if you win the game. For the Americans, that means the end of turn 10. And for the Japanese, it's exactly the same thing. They receive 2 random reinforcements, and these reinforcements have to go in one of these locations, these port locations with the red anchor that can be on those 2 sides. There are those 2, and there are those 2. So wherever you place them, they have to come, your 2 reinforcements for the turn, in the same location. And so as you can see, they start threatening both sides, and that becomes pretty scary for the Americans. So it's the same thing. The Japanese receive 2 reinforcements, but they start from turn 1. They can perform 2 actions, moving and or using actions printed on the block. They can start a combat. That would not have been okay because there was no strength value there, but I didn't know. They can start a combat. And again, oh, the Americans have strength 0 there. There you go. And what was the fight? Was it there? That doesn't matter. You know what I mean. Receive blocks, move, possibly start a combat, and check if you won. If, for example, oh, I'm taking control as Japanese of a place next to Henderson Field. And that's basically how you play the game for the 2-player game. The solo game is printed on the other side of the board, and if you played any of the game books or book games by Worthington Games, you'll be familiar with this one. It's the same method, it's the same mechanism. You're gonna have blocks on the board, a slightly different composition of blocks, of different pools of blocks. You're gonna have the main map here, and again, you're trying to retain control of Henderson Field. However, you also have to keep track of how well Henderson Field is doing. There will be levels of strength during the game. There will be Japanese actions that will weaken Henderson Field. It can even be under 0 temporarily, but if the level of Henderson Field is under 0 at the end of a turn, you lose the game, and hopefully it will be higher than that because you'll be spending actions to repair the field. And they also, so the Japanese win by damaging Henderson Field enough, or again by taking control of it, as their units will be on the board and they will try to advance, but you will also try to defend with your own blocks there. At that point, your blocks will be face up because it's solo, so you need to know things like that. So, how is the mechanism? Again, as I said, you played Worthington Games in their book game line. You know that the main mechanic is there are actions for the active player, and you will select the action that you will perform. Usually the action will have to change from turn to turn. After you commit to an action, though, before you resolve it, you go to the Japanese actions, you roll there, That die roll resolves the action, determines the action, then you resolve the action, and after the Japanese have taken the action, then you finally carry out the action that you committed to. And so to give you a sense, you will have, again, repair the airfield, super important. And things such as try to appeal to the Navy for help, but then you need to roll an event, so you don't know exactly what kind of help you're going to receive from the American events table. Raid the jungle, raid Collie Point, raid Point Cruise, so different kind of attacks. And when the Japanese are taking their action, you will roll to see if in a certain area they will get new people or they will attack. And the way that works is that you roll a die, and if the result is higher, result is equal to or lower than the strength that they have there, they will attack. Mainly, that means that the higher the strength that they have there, the more likely they are to attack, because the more likely you are to roll lower than that. Otherwise, they will not attack, but will get reinforcements. Once it's determined if they attack, and say that they attack, you need to calculate their total strength, and you do that by adding together all those factors. It looks like a bit like a procedure at the beginning, but it's manageable. Also, you have the Banzai table here that will give positive modifiers, add the strength value to the Japanese. Once you have their total attack strength, you will also determine the total defense strength of the Americans, again adding together several things. Most importantly, air support. The better you're doing with the situation on the airfield, the better you're gonna be with your defense. And so you compare those results and you determine the outcome of the value once you have the total Japanese strength and the total American strength. Whichever side loses in the solitaire fight will lose a strength point there. So this is how you play the two versions of Archie's War. So Archie's War, the Battle for Guadalcanal, basically two games about the same topic. The solo game was okay, but not super exciting. If nothing else, because you're gonna choose the action of repairing the field a lot, because you start with the field being in a pretty bad situation, so you have to do that. And the advantage is huge, because if you're able to repair it enough times, you get a substantial bonus in defense. So the script seems to be very similar every time that you're going to play, because you have to do that. And once the moment of tension that you have the first couple of turns, if you lose the field at the very beginning, then the situation becomes stable. So the tension kind of goes down a little instead of going up. Yes, they're building up. As you do that, repair the field, the Japanese are building up powerful attack forces out there. But again, with your air support, you can handle those. So, and the general mechanism, again, reminded me of the book games by Worthington, but with a combat resolution that felt a little more cumbersome than those other ones, and a little less smooth. So I would say if the game was just that, I don't know that I would be recommending it. You can think of it as a bonus game that comes with the other one, which actually is a lot more interesting, the two-player game. When I tell people, oh, the game is a block game, unless they are war gamers, their idea is always, oh, you mean like Stratego. I mean that, but also not, because of course the general mechanism of hidden unit is common to that game, which is very popular, but the idea is to hardwire actual history and historical dynamics and mechanics within that mechanism. And so the hidden element here works very well, because we're in Guadalcanal, we're trying to guess who is coming out of the jungle, where enemy units are, exactly how powerful they are. And so that guessing and bluffing is very important. The value of information is very important. Say, the American Vandergrift unit, that unbeatable tank unit, unbeatable in the battlefield, can be taken down by a Japanese action called attrition, which simply means it removes a unit from a location, and the Japanese will randomly choose a unit in the location selected for attrition. That means if the Vandergrift unit has been left alone, the Japanese will definitely want to choose that location and remove it. Then there's an action, American action, which is to resupply, to try to bring it back. But the idea is that it's not just the material strength of the Vandergrift unit that makes it powerful. It also needs to be protected by uncertainty. If the Japanese know exactly where it is, then they can target it. And there are a lot of these interesting elements that will emerge when you become familiar with the effects. And really knowing and taking into account which unique one-time effects have been used and which ones have not, that is the heart of the game. And I really like that combination of units that have a numerical value and units that are effects or game effects disguised as units. And again, that element of the Japanese have an amphibious attack, so they can attack from the sea. That means you should never leave Henderson Field empty if the Japanese have not used that block, because then they just sneak in from the sea and they use it. But maybe that was eliminated and you're trying to guess whether or not that was eliminated. There are ways of eliminating blocks in which you don't see what is eliminated. And so you gotta guess the way. So there is a bluffing element which is very interesting, and here, opposite to the solo game, there is a mounting tension because both sides are gonna be hanging by a thread. The American side in particular, because although you may have the material advantage, just a simple opening, just a small mistake may allow the Japanese to go in. Again, if for example you have a front that is open, that only has one defender, attrition removes it, and the Japanese go in, take control of a location adjacent to Henderson Field, they're one step closer to victory. So ideally, you always want to have a defense of 2 blocks on those 2 neck points, the bottleneck points that lead to the beach. You always want to have 2, so even if one action is used for attrition, the other action the Japanese will need another action to get in. Ideally, but that's not always the case. Again, ideally you want to protect those bottlenecks, but if you lose one, then the Japanese may have a path to go to Bloody Ridge. And again, you cannot be strong everywhere as the American player, and you will take casualties, and you will see that Japanese are one step closer to victory and then another, and I really cannot make any mistake. So there definitely is a sense of mounting tension for both players. For the Japanese also, because they have such fewer units. Starting from turn 3, they take attrition every other turn, automatically on top of whatever the American player may inflict. But again, they don't need much. They just need to place units close to where they can shell Henderson Field. So there's a definitely nice tension there. Now, one thing is about balance. I played the 2-player game, I believe, 5 times. I still have to see an American victory every time the Japanese won. So if any case, I can feel comfortable saying the American side seems to have a harder time, or maybe the game is just really not balanced, or my opponent is just so good. But then my opponent lost when he was playing the Americans. So here's it's an easy fix, so to speak. The game is pretty short. You can play in half an hour or so. So then play 2 games back to back. If you really can't figure out a way to win as the Americans, played it twice back-to-back, switch side, and see who, as the Japanese player, is able to win the earliest, and that player will be the winner of your mini tournament of your session. So with a game that is this short, frankly, I don't mind the lack of balance or the extra challenge for one side, precisely because of this reason. Then you turn, instead of a single game, like a mini tournament, and you determine overall victory that way. Generally speaking, it is also nice to have a game that does have historical flavor, while at the same time being so simple, short, and easy to play, and have so much tension. So to me, the very interesting piece here is the 2-player game. You get the solo game as a bonus, so why not? And this is my assessment of Archie's War.